Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're based, to all of you joining us online on our live stream. A warm welcome from Hamburg, moin moin, as we like to say here. It's a pleasure to have you here as our guest, and it's great to see a packed room when we're all here to launch the next edition of DNV's Maritime Forecast to 2050 report. Quite a few of you will be familiar with that publication. I think it's fair to say it has truly evolved into one of the leading publications on maritime decarbonization over recent years. It's published under the umbrella of DNV's bigger suite of energy transition outlook reports. And my personal view is that it's indeed very timely and also very critical for our industry at this point in time. My name is Anne Moschner. I am the Communications and Marketing Director of DNV Maritime. It's my pleasure to be your host today for this coming hour. We'll try to stick on time, but we of course have a lot of ground to cover and some interesting insights to share. So let's see how we're gonna do to tackle what still is the greatest challenge of our time, maritime decarbonization. I don't think that needs much explaining to any of you, but let's very quickly recap what we're faced with. We're faced with ever stringent regulations. We're certainly seeing push from cargo owners. We are seeing changing financing terms, and yes, there is societal pressure increasing. So it's a world of complexities, of uncertainty, and yes, we've talked about all of that before, also last year, but maybe it's fair to say that our industry's journey towards a sustainable future is on the move. There is progress. Whether that's good enough, whether things are moving fast enough, will be certainly a point of our discussion later today. But at least the targets are clear. It's net zero by 2050, but what will it take us all to get there? That is at the core of what the Maritime Forecast is all about. It's about exploring different pathways, looking into different scenarios that will help all of us navigate, hopefully, towards a sustainable future, and should also help all of you take well-informed, better informed, and very importantly, science-based decisions with pragmatism and with determination. Today, as we dive into the insights of the Maritime Forecast, we're going to look into the key findings for sure, but of course we also want to put them into context and hear it from some top experts and leaders from the industry who have agreed to share their views and share a little bit of their own decarbonization journey and how they navigate the complexities. So we've got an interesting lineup of speakers today. So very, very quick run through the agenda. In a moment, we're going to kick it off officially with a keynote by our Group President and CEO, Remy Eriksson, who will open the floor. And afterwards, our lead author of this year's Maritime Forecast will take you through the key findings in a short and sweet presentation. He'll put it into context. We'll talk a bit about the implications. And of course, he also brings a few recommendations for all of you. And afterwards, it's going to be our great honor to be joined by the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization. He has agreed to sit down for a fireside chat on stage with our maritime CEO, Knut Øberg-Nielsen. Both will join us in the room in a little while. They're still currently at the press conference of the SMM. So a lot of things going on at the same time, but very much looking forward to that. And afterwards, hopefully, we will get to engage in a lively panel debate, addressing some of the industry's key challenges, and hopefully also we'll talk about possible solutions. I'll do a proper round of introduction later on once we get to the panel, but we do have some truly big names on the list. We have Shell, TUI Cruises, ABN AMRO, and Greek Maritime, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. Before we get there, and before Remy in a moment will get to open the floor, we thought it's maybe nice to warm you all up for what is truly the hottest topic on the industry's agenda with a small video. Please.
In the heart of an era of technological exploration, the maritime industry is steering towards a future of net zero emissions. The journey is far-reaching and costly, but the destination is clear. A maritime world powered by carbon-neutral fuels or technologies by 2050. As carbon-neutral fuels remain elusive, energy efficiency measures become our lifeline to achieve intermediate reduction targets. Energy-saving technologies, once considered prohibitively expensive, can now become attractive when compared to the costs of carbon-neutral fuels. In a time of extensive exploration and an evolving regulatory landscape, knowing and constantly evaluating your options remains crucial. DNV's Maritime Forecast to 2050 serves as a beacon for the maritime industry, providing an independent outlook of shipping's energy future and assessing how the transition will affect its stakeholders. The report indicates that by harnessing operational and technical energy efficiency measures, a fuel reduction of 4 to 16% can be achieved by 2030, leading to a significant variation in the projected demand for carbon-neutral fuels and CO2 storage from shipping. Digital tools drive decarbonization and energy efficiency, providing performance data to evaluate savings, helping to design future-proof vessels. A pooling mechanism can reduce the total cost per ton of greenhouse gas emissions saved from 2023 to 2050 by around 6%. In all 4 investigated decarbonization scenarios, onboard carbon capture emerges as an important technology for reducing greenhouse gas emissions after 2030. With such a complex picture emerging, smart decision-making and strategic investments are needed today to lay the foundations for future emissions reductions. The stakes are high and the possibilities are vast. Now, more than ever, the industry must unite to unlock the potential of the many options.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends of DNV, welcome to the launch of this year's edition of our Maritime Forecast to 2050. My task here today is to give you the broader context of the global energy transition unfolding around the transition in maritime. There's a lot of talk these days about whether the energy transition is slowing down or even reversing. People talk about slow EV sales and failed wind projects in the Western world as evidence for this. But despite decarbonization slowing down within certain industries in certain areas of the world, the energy transition is still very much moving forward if we look at the totality across the world. At DNV, we look at the long lines of development, and these lines show that the cost for solar, wind, and batteries will continue to decrease, and we are seeing and will see exponential uptake of those technologies. We also know that the transition doesn't happen smoothly. Some technologies will pull ahead, others will fall behind, and some will trade places down the line. Right now, the technologies doing really well are solar and batteries. Investment in solar will be at record levels again this year, and is expected to exceed $500 billion. More money is now going into solar PV than all other electricity generation technologies combined. Battery production will also set new records this year and is expected to quadruple by 2030. What about wind power? Well, we saw record onshore installations last year and a projected recovery of offshore wind this year, overriding some challenges brought by inflation, interest rates, and difficult supply chains. However, for the continued success of offshore wind, we need more supportive and predictable policies for wind power developers. At DNV, we forecast that solar and wind will make up 50% of global electricity generation by 2040. 50%. One might question why an electricity forecast is relevant for a shipping audience. Well, one of the points we make in this year's Maritime Forecast is that shipping needs to cooperate heavily with land-based sectors to secure a transition to carbon-neutral fuels. We believe it's a key challenge, a key strategic challenge, for example, to try to understand where renewable power and electrolyzer capacity are likely to be concentrated. Making electricity green, though, is the easier part of the energy transition. The real challenge, where progress is even reversing in some cases, lies within the hard-to-electrify sectors. Hydrogen-derived fuels, also biofuels, are expensive now and will remain relatively expensive in the future, even with technology development and cost downs. Their uptake relies heavily on policy backing, both with the carrot and the stick, so incentives like we see with the IRA in the US, and taxation like we see here in US on price on carbon. In Europe, like we see on price on carbon. So unfortunately, we will see continued uncertainty in this area for shipping in the years to come, as we detail in our Maritime Forecast. But doing nothing in the face of uncertainty is not an option. Energy efficiency improvements, as you heard in the video, are becoming ever more urgent. As you will later hear also from our Maritime Forecast editor, Erik Overum, in a minute. The same goes for efficiencies coming from digitalization and data-driven decisions. The shipping industry has shown that it can take bold and brave action based on scientific evidence, and I remain confident that it will tackle the decarbonization challenge with boldness and in a spirit of collaboration. As ever, DNV stands committed passionately to facilitate collaboration and action to the benefit of all stakeholders. Thank you, and I hand it back to Anna.
Thank you very much indeed, Remy. That was the perfect way to set the scene. Thank you for giving us the broader context and very important there to highlight collaboration towards the end of the speech. That is, of course, absolutely key. Collaboration is the fuel of the future, as we said many, many times in DNV. Collaboration is key, as is a common understanding of the data and the science available today that will help us take the right decisions for tomorrow. And that's exactly what we're trying to do now. We want to try and establish a common understanding by looking at our Maritime Forecast report's key findings, brought to you by the lead author, Erik Overum. Please.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Remy. So, the Maritime Forecast is, as you said, one part of DNV's suite of energy transition outlook reports. This is the 8th edition, providing an updated outlook on regulations, drivers, technologies, and fuels for decarbonizing shipping. The maritime course for decarbonization is set, and the speed is set, and we are in an unprecedented era of technological exploration in shipping. Regulations are coming that will impose a cost on emissions, impacting the asset values of existing ships. In the EU, 2024 is the first year where ships will be subject to the EU Emissions Trading System, ETS. And coming soon in 2025, the Fuel EU Maritime will impose a well-to-wake requirement on energy used during a year, effectively forcing the use of qualified low greenhouse gas fuels. Globally, the IMO is working on implementing its greenhouse gas strategy. And they are developing, the regulations are to be adopted in 2025 and about to enter into force around mid-2027. The ongoing negotiations in the IMO are developing what is called a basket of measures with two parts. A technical element, which will be a mandate on reduced greenhouse gas fuel intensity, and an economic element, which will be a greenhouse gas emissions pricing mechanism, possibly including flexibility, pooling. We are monitoring the technical development of the world fleet and the transition to new fuel technologies. And we see that the transition is progressing, with half the ordered tonnage able to use LNG, LPG, or methanol in dual fuel engines. There are, however, large variations between the different segments. So we see that the number of ships capable of using LNG keeps rising, and there are many methanol and LPG capable ships in the order book. We also see the first orders for ammonia-fueled vessels, despite the low maturity of an ammonia energy converter technology. Yes. We have a database of existing and planned production facilities for carbon-neutral fuels, with high and low estimates for global production capacities seen here on the left. In a set of simulations we performed for the IMO, where the world fleet achieves IMO's ambition of 20% emission reduction in 2030 relative to 2008 levels, the world fleet saved between 4% and 16% of its fuel consumption in 2030. And saving energy for the world fleet will mean that we will require less carbon-neutral fuel and less onboard carbon capture, as seen in the range of demand for the IMO scenarios on the right. And when we compare our estimates for global production capacities of carbon-neutral fuel with the range of demand in the IMO scenarios, we see that shipping requires, depending on how much energy we can save, between 10% and 100% of global carbon-neutral fuel production capacity across all sectors in 2030 to reach IMO's 2030 goals. And that could be challenging. So, therefore, the world fleet must attack the energy losses, the easiest way of reducing emissions. Only about half the fuel energy is converted into shaft power, and about only a third produces propulsion thrust to overcome the resistance to move the hull through the water. Luckily, there's a range of technologies that can help us reduce these losses, both for new builds and for retrofits. And if we could save 16%, well, rather I should say, when we save 16% of fuel consumption for the world fleet, we will save over 40 million tons of fuel per year, or 120 million tons of CO2 emitted. And this is equivalent to operating the 55,000 smallest ships, or the 2,500 largest ships on carbon-neutral fuel. At the same time, there's an ongoing digital transition, connecting ships to the internet and onshore operation centers. Gathering this information can be used for decision support and efficiency improvements of ships, for example, by weather routing or early warnings on fouling of propeller or hull. And importantly, gathering all this information enables ship owners to more easily comply with emission reporting. Furthermore, having transparency of information in the value chain can lead to new contracts, incentivizing sharing the costs and benefits of reducing energy use and emissions. What you see on the screen here is the well-to-wake emissions from providing power to the ship, from an onboard engine, from shore power, or from using electrofuels. Using shore power, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions even when the shore power is not fully green, due to the very high efficiency in the direct use of electricity. Conversely, using electrofuels, we must produce them from very green electricity in order to reduce total greenhouse gas emissions. We estimate that as much as 7% of the world fleet's fuel consumption is import, providing an upper limit to the potential for shore power to reduce emissions. Further emission reductions could come from short sea shipping, exploring electrification through plug-in hybrids. The potential for shore power has been recognized, and the Fuel EU Maritime is mandating its use in major ports from 2030 for passenger ships and container vessels above 5,000 gross tons. Onboard carbon capture has the potential to become the most cost-effective way of decarbonizing shipping. But for this solution to have a big impact, the CCS value chain will have to be developed, ship-specific infrastructure must be built, and regulations adopted. In the same way as for carbon-neutral fuels, we have built a database of existing and planned projects for CO2 storage, with high and low estimates for global CO2 storage capacity in 2030 of 67 and 47 million tons of CO2 stored. In the previously mentioned set of simulations, the world fleet captured and stored between 4 and 76 million tons of CO2. On the map here, in green, we show the size and location of planned CO2 storage projects across all industries and not dedicated for shipping. The 10 largest announced CO2 projects have annual CO2 storage capacities of between 7.5 and 20 million tons of CO2. In blue, we indicate the annual emissions from ships sailing into the largest ports on their last voyage. And this is CO2 that potentially could be captured and offloaded in that port. For a port to be able to receive and transmit large amounts of CO2, ship-specific infrastructure and CO2 storage must be built. So we could have green corridors for CCS, and if there is a potential levy from CO2, revenue from that should be used to develop CCS infrastructure for shipping. We simulate the development of the fuel mix of shipping, as you can see here, using our model of the world fleet, simulating ship by ship, year by year. In the model, each ship chooses the lowest cost fuel and technology to comply with emission regulations. Today, several different fuel technologies are being tested or rolled out as a response to regulations and drivers. So this year, we present 4 exploratory scenarios where we vary the input fuel prices and capex within the range of uncertainty. And we see that under certain circumstances, biofuels, onboard carbon capture, and methanol can have significant shares of the future fuel mix, while in these 2 last scenarios, ammonia and hydrogen achieve higher shares. No single fuel or technology dominates in any of the scenarios, though it should be mentioned that onboard carbon capture is present in all of them. Instead, we have a diverse fuel mix. And very importantly, when we do small variations to the input, we can have large differences in the output. So, ship owners should prepare their ships and fleet for the current situation and use scenarios to prepare for the future. The total increase in costs for these 4 scenarios has been found by comparing with the business as usual scenario. And we see that in a decarbonized 2050, the cost of bulk transport will increase by over 70%, for tankers around 80%, while doubling the cost of transporting goods in containers. Ultimately, this increased cost of seaborne transport will have to be moved through the value chain to the consumer as an increase in the price of goods. And there are already movements in the market to do this. Ship owners need to develop fleet strategies for staying competitive. The IMO is considering using greenhouse gas fuel intensity, gradually requiring the increased use of low greenhouse gas fuels. At the same time, there are discussions on allowing pools of ships to meet this requirement. In a set of simulations we have performed for the IMO, assessing the impact of different regulations on the world fleet, we've found that allowing pooling of compliance can reduce the total cost per ton of greenhouse gas emission reduction by 6%. And this is not insignificant. A variant of this is used in the fuel e-maritime. And as an example case study, we show here one ship using as much e-methanol as possible, over complying with the fuel e-maritime. This ship can enter into a pool with 13 all fossil vessels, otherwise identical to the methanol fuel ship. And they pay a pool ticket to join. The pool itself is compliant, and none of the ships need to pay the fuel EU penalty for 2030 to 2034. So, ship owners can reduce costs by developing pooling strategies for their fleet, possibly also with other ship owners. So, our key findings are that half the ordered tonnage can use LNG, LPG, or methanol in dual fuel engines. And we found that shore power could reduce emissions from shipping by up to 7%. And crucially, energy efficiency measures could save 16% of emissions by 2030, which would be required to meet IMO's 2030 goals, and which is equivalent to operating the 55,000 smallest ships on carbon neutral fuel. At the same time, CO2 storage facilities should be planned in conjunction with major ports. And taking all of this together, decarbonizing shipping could double the cost of transporting goods in containers. However, looking at the bright side, pooling can actually reduce the cost of decarbonization by 6%. Today, we are in an unprecedented era of technological exploration in shipping. And with an evolving regulatory landscape, it's crucial to know and constantly evaluate your options. So, ship owners should prepare their ships for the current situation, use simulations to prepare for the future. And for every ship, we should work to reduce energy losses and harvest energy from the environment. The 4 main recommendations are that ship owners should reduce energy consumption now, consider all decarbonization options, focus on fuel flexibility, and consider long-term fuel strategies. Thank you. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you very much indeed, Eirik. Great overview, great job done in summarizing the extensive research that Eirik and the team has been diving into. And I can only recommend you also take a closer look into the Maritime Forecast, which is, of course, available for download on our website. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, after now having gained valuable insight into the current status of the maritime energy transition and possible future scenarios, we would now like to shift our focus to the key regulatory factors shaping our industry, shaping our future. And it is now my great pleasure and privilege to welcome to the stage the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, Arsenio Dominguez. A warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you. Welcome. And he will be joined by the Maritime CEO of DNV, Knut Ebbek Nielsen. Please, gentlemen, you may take a seat.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Oh, we call this center stage.
Yes, this is the center stage.
Not the trial seat, right?
Not the hot seat. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here. Great to see a full room. And thank you very much, Arsenio, for joining us at the launch of this year's Maritime Forecast. Now, you have been in your position now as Secretary General for nearly a year, almost a year.
8 months. Let's go with the facts. 8 months.
All right.
But thank you for the nearly a year.
All right. And so just to kick us off, we have 15 minutes, so we have to be pretty sharp. So what is your assessment of the status of the shipping industry and its progress towards decarbonization at this stage? And do you have any sort of viewpoints that you would like to share with the audience, please?
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity and for the presentation of the report, which of course form part of all the necessary information that we utilize at IMO in order to continue to make progress. We continue to be on track in order to develop and implement the basket of measures that you just heard, the technical and economic measures, in order to support the 2023 strategy for decarbonization, aiming at decarbonizing the sector by around 2050. There's further conversations that are ongoing. We also continue to work as the organization with other sectors. I'm working very much in highlighting the importance of shipping, as well as establishing those synergies and partnerships with other sectors where we'll be providing not just a technological development, but also the alternative fuels that we need in order to meet our goals. At the same time, we are working on the safety aspects, as well as the training and promotion of shipping as a career, and continue to bring the newer generations closer to us, and of course, to be operating the ships of the future, the present and the future.
I don't mean to be rude, but I have to ask this question. Looking at the progress so far, is it realistic that we will achieve almost net zero by 2050?
Yes, of course, we have... People say that I'm very optimistic, but the difficulties that I normally face is that we keep talking about the challenges, and there are several. I'm not undermining the challenges, but we need to start shifting and being more optimistic and looking into the opportunities that are there. Just look at the report. Right now, we choose energy efficiency measures. You can increase that efficiency of a ship by 60%. The regulations have been there, but somehow not every single one of them it's been taken on board. So there are actions that we can even take before we welcome and receive all the alternative fuels that are there. Then is the areas of safety. And of course, the geopolitics are also playing its part. But we have dealt with geopolitics in the past. At IMO, that's what we thrive on. We bring the member states together, we address the challenges head on, and this is a transition. It's not going to be an overnight shift, but a transition. And that's what I continue to focus on. And the fact that there's progress, look at the order books. This is why we actually need the kind of information from the Maritime Forecast that continues to demonstrate that as long as we continue to take the actions, continue to develop the measures, talk to everyone, engage, involve, and cooperate. And when I say cooperate, is how we actually share the information with one another and the experience, and improve as well as a sector, because we will need to change. All those put together will take us to 2050.
Great. I think there's lots of potential in energy efficiency, as you also pointed to, and not least also sharing the learning that we'll have along that journey, which you pointed to. Coming back to this important MEPC meeting, commencing in a few weeks, where you will work naturally on the regulations and this basket of measures. And what can we expect from this meeting? And will we see a decision on a price on carbon?
I'm going to be very honest. You won't get a final decision at the next MEPC. We have a time frame, and member states need time to actually assess the impact assessment of on states, on the fleet, on global trade, that is just going to be presented to the committee right now. That is going to further inform the decision-making process. And that will take us into the next round of negotiations. By the time that we come to MEPC 83 next year, and of course, the last one in October, which is a special session just for the topic of decarbonization in GHG, is when we'll find is when you will see the solutions. So the next MEPC, the main focus is, now we have the report, and you were very much, DNV was very much engaged into it, of what are those possible negative effects, and how then we need to tailor and define and create the architecture of the economic and technical measures in order to support that transition, as well as focusing reducing any negative impact. Is that clear enough?
Yeah. What do
Is
you
that
think?
clear enough for you? So you won't get the measure the next session. Don't picture that this is the way that we're going to introduce the economic measure, which I know has a lot of focus from everyone. You won't see that at the next session. I'm not going to lie to you here, but you will see the progress in how we continue to have those conversations with everyone. We have time. The member states were all together in setting up the target by October 2025. Yes, it's just over a year from now, but the progress is on track with the different timetables that we put in place in order to get the necessary information and find an educated and informed decision, as well as taking on board all the concerns that are there.
I think this is very clear.
Is that clear?
Yeah, I think that's very clear. I want to turn a little bit to the need for innovation. I mean, in order for us to progress along this journey, we really need to challenge the status quo, look for better technology solutions, and any other solution that can help us on the way. And coming back to this potential price on carbon, it's going to be quite a bit of money being accumulated. Are you able to share any reflections on how that might be coming back to the industry and support innovation and technology development, please?
There are several conversations that have taken place right now. Not a final decision has been made. We still, again, need to wait for the outcome of this impact assessment in order to engage further on it. But from the very beginning, there's a lot of focus on having this economic measure to be for in-sector application in order to support the transition, because we need to help ourselves as well. At some point, of course, we can continue to have conversations of how others will be able to benefit from it, especially when you start making the linkages with maritime. But this is a global sector, and we know that we need to support technical cooperation, for example, for the member states, particularly those small island developing states and least developed countries. It's been talked as well into how we're going to improve and help the transition for the side of the seafarers, particularly education and training. Of course, looking into the early movers and the actions that they have taken, and how they can also benefit from it. So all this, it's on the pipeline, it's been discussed, and of course, it will take part of how we're going to utilize properly this revenue in order to achieve the transitions and the goal in the maritime sector.
Thank you. Now, in the shipping communities, we are really very fortunate to have a global regulator. And my question is around, it relates to fuels, the provision of better fuels, but also what Eirik talked about reception facilities for carbon that has been captured. Now, this is, as far as I understand it, outside of the authority of the IMO. But is there any way in which the IMO can help facilitate that collaboration and that sort of, because we are very dependent on it, and we are not able to resolve all these issues within the shipping industry itself?
Correct. Several of the actions that are required for us to meet our goals depend on actions from other sectors, other UN agencies inclusive. But this is one of the areas that I'm focusing a lot on IMO, and it's in particular how we look more outwards and not always inwards within the shipping sector. We have some experience during IMO 2020, and when we were reducing the content of sulfur in the fuel, and we needed to engage a lot with the energy sector. And that's part of my role into bringing the energy sectors, bringing more awareness on the member states when they develop the national strategy, not to leave shipping at the bottom, but actually raise it further to the top in order for us to receive and be available to play a part on those fuels that we will be transporting, but other sectors will be requiring. But this is where gatherings like this one also can be utilized to attract those sectors to learn more from shipping, because we are not very good at promoting ourselves and at letting people know or explaining and educating on how essential we are, how good and effective we are, and how much we require the help as well. And there's a plethora of opportunities that we have there. And that's what I keep tapping into, not just talking to the shipping industry, but going out there to the to the energy sector, for example. And one of the actions that I have taken is when we roll out technical cooperation activities and capacity building in developing countries, to also invite representatives for the energy sectors so they get familiarized with IMO, with the work that we're doing and the needs that we have from them.
We certainly appreciate that effort. Now you have quite a big audience here in the room, and also there are people following the live stream. Are there any sort of specific messages that you would like to give to the audience?
Yes. Don't lose faith in IMO. I always start with that. But I prefer that reaction to others that I've had. We're not slow. We need to take actions in relation to what is good for the sector, how can 176 member states can actually benefit as well and be part of the solution, because what we don't want is to have a reduction of emissions in one part of the world and then just mobilizing them, if I put it that way, or having the emissions in other parts. Not everyone in this planet will benefit from it. Focus on the seafarers. We need to invest in shipping, and that includes the seafarers. We need to be more transparent. When you talked about cooperation, for me is think exactly how you're going to implement that cooperation. How far are you prepared to share your experience and knowledge with others that would actually allow us to move forward together as a sector? Because that is also needed. The fact that we need to enhance on gender, and I made it very clear that is one of my key priorities, together with bringing a younger generation into the shipping sectors. We need to adapt to them. We cannot just operate the same way that we've been doing it for centuries and expect that the younger generations or the females will actually adapt to us. We need to play our part. And again, that goes back into being better demonstrated what shipping is all about, or how we care for the future of the environment as well as the people. And again, don't lose faith in IMO. We will continue to work. We'll continue to listen to your concerns. I don't believe in harsh criticisms. For me, it's opportunities to listen to you, to learn into what I can further input and bring onto the table for consideration of the member states, because you are the end users. You will say that it's very easy for me to say all that, sitting just here and then just going back to the building in London. But that's not the case. I want to engage with all of you. I want to listen, because you deserve to be listened. We won't be able to address every single concern that you have, or make everybody happy, as I always said, that it's nearly impossible. But as long as you know that we are aware that we're working, we're listening to you, and we'll make our efforts in order to continue to have a sustainable future for shipping, I hope that you can support me on that.
Absolutely. We will do that. Now, time is running out on this fireside chat, but I would like to ask you one personal question. What would be your personal ambitions and targets for 2025, please? 2025.
I will avoid the internal changes of the organization that I'm making, because that's the boring part, into for us also being more effective when we support the member states and all the stakeholders. My key factor right now is safety and security of the seafarers, particularly what's happening in the Red Sea, is detrimental. It's just unacceptable. We still have seafarers that have been hijacked since November last year. So I'm working very hard with all the member states, with all stakeholders, with the UN as well, in finding solutions. Most of them this time as well are outside IMO, but I will not rest on that. And the second one is also focusing again on promoting shipping better, to externalizing all the work that IMO carries out and everything that you all do, in order to bring more attention from the younger generations, the ones that are going to take over from us. And last but not least, to continue to work very closely with the member states in this incredible journey that is decarbonization. It's exciting. There's a lot that is happening. Yes, there are concerns and there are challenges, but let's focus on all the innovations that you can actually see here at SMM that actually are going to provide some of the answers, if not most of them, for how we're going to be operating in the future.
Great KPIs, I must say, Arsenio. Thank you so much for joining us, and give Arsenio a big hand, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If we could, excuse me, gentlemen, just Arsenia, if we could ask you very briefly to stay on stage for a quick photo that we would like to take while we have you here.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And
Oh, wow.
wow.
Now I can
wow.
see you.
Am I? You take the picture.
Thank you
Perfect.
so much.
Thank you very much. And Knut, indeed, you may stay on stage, and you're hiding now. Yeah, please take a seat. That's perfectly fine. Great. That was very insightful. Thank you very much for sharing. A very optimistic talk, I must say, and some interesting insights that will now hopefully provide a perfect backdrop to our upcoming panel discussion, where we will try to explore the future of maritime decarbonization further with some players from the industry, some leading voices, if I may say so, from the industry. And I would now like to invite all of you panelists to join me here on stage. Please take your time, because while you may come up here, please. But take your time, because while you're doing that and get settled in, I'll do my little commercial break. The Maritime Forecast is available for download at dnv.com/maritime forecast. So we recommend you go there, download the full report. You will also find a recording of today's event there. There will be links to articles to relevant DNV services for sure. And of course, you can also contact our experts online. And of course, you can also meet quite a few of us here at SMM. And that is it for the commercial break. And we can get started with our little discussion. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here. And let's dive straight into it, because also for this panel, we do not have that much time. And I don't think I'm giving it away. We're not going to solve the grand challenge of our time by talking on stage for 30 minutes, but maybe we can contribute to the discussion, and we hopefully can also inspire those of you listening in the audience. I'll do a quick round of introduction, then we'll jump straight into the questions. So a warm welcome to Anastasia Trineva from ABN AMRO, Head of Shipping Clients, and you may give her a round of applause, please. Welcome Wiebke Meyer, who's CEO of TUI Cruises. Thank you for joining us. Carl Henriksen joining us from Shell, and let me get your title right, General Manager of Shipping Management and Innovation. Yeah. Thank you for being with us. And last and certainly not least, Kerstin Hernes, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at the Greek Maritime Group. Thank you for joining us. And Knut doesn't need any introduction. Great start. Let's start by taking stock and trying to get your individual perspectives. And I would like to do a quick tour, maybe starting with you first, Anastasia. So we've heard from Eirik, we've also mentioned in the video that indeed, we are another year closer to 2030, which is an important milestone on the IMO trajectory. You know, we're aiming to achieve 20% reduction compared to 2008 levels. So another year closer, and maybe we have a bit more clarity under our belts by now, and some progress, certainly, that we've seen. But I'd like to hear from all of you individually. How would you assess the current state of the maritime decarbonization journey? Anastasia, please.
Thank you, Anne. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. And why is that? I think everyone in the audience will agree that there's no conversation, there's no dialogue that we participate in or we listen to where sustainability and energy transition of the shipping sector is not right front and center, one of the themes that we cover. I think also in terms of research, in terms of innovation, in terms of data availability, and I think this is a sector which is tremendously data rich. I think we have also taken a very big leap of faith, and I also see increase in investment. However, I don't think that we have reached a very significant tipping point, and I want to quote Warren Buffett, who says, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." And how I interpret what Mr. Buffett says is that incentive really drives human behavior. It's very important for financial investments. It's not the only one, because we also are intrinsically motivated for the future generations to come to go through this transition timely. However, we all know that financial investments require incentives. Therefore, I think there will be a couple of tipping points, but the near end one will be very much regulatory driven, and I'll say more about it later.
Absolutely. We'll come back to the topic of financial incentives for sure. Wiebke, what's your view?
Well, representing a rather small part of shipping, but the holiday part of shipping, for us, when TUI Cruises was founded, that was in 2008, sustainability, to keep the ecological footprint at as low as possible, was on our agenda. And we were able to build new ships, and we started a series of new ships, which we all built in Finland. So everything was driven to make these ships more environmental friendly and more energy efficient. But I share your view, because in addition to the regulatory requirements and general requirements, of course, our customers really expect that. On one hand, I'm super happy that we are operating one of the youngest and most energy efficient fleets, and we are getting more ships. And this year, in 2024, we also launched a ship which is ready to burn methanol or biomethanol in the future. So we do everything what we can do as the whole cruise industry, and we saw it in the quick summary that the big majority of ships which is coming to the waters has dual fuel engines, and so greatest flexibility to use these low emission fuels. That's one thing. Energy efficiency maybe for cruise operators is a little easier, because TUI Cruises operating in Europe, 65% of our capacity is operated in Europe, so slow steaming is a thing what we can do, maybe easier. But on the other hand, I also see the strong support by policymakers needed, and also by governments investing in R&D developments for renewable fuels. That's key. We can achieve a lot by operational and technical measures, which can also be applied on existing fleet. But we definitely need the support to get access to these low-emission fuels and to have it distributed to the hubs where we are sailing to.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. There's a lot in your response, and we'll come back to a few things. Thank you also for mentioning energy efficiency. Very curious to learn more there. Carl, your view on the current state of things?
Yeah, I'm glad that my views are not going to conflict with the Secretary General's. So
Let's find out.
Also optimistic, cautiously optimistic. I tend to look at the world quite simply, and I think there's enough solutions in the mix currently within a 2030 context to start really making a fist of hitting those targets. But we also need to bear in mind we've got 5 years left, and therefore really leaning into implementing the operational efficiency measures, the energy efficient technologies, and then getting after some of those lower carbon fuels that are available and abundant and affordable today, such as LNG, something we need to do. And that optimism is not just my own gut feeling, it's dealing with the people that I deal with day to day, particularly on the commercial side of the business, that have been saying for the last kind of 12 months, you know, pulling on that support, we need your help to understand, particularly around the EU regulations, what the requirements are going to be, the compliance pathways. That level of interest suggests to me that we've got a hook. And I think it's that important link between regulation and action, and we're starting to see that where we do have that regulation. So cautiously optimistic.
Thank you for sharing that view. And then over to you, Kerstin. Well, what is your reflection?
It would maybe be more interesting if I disagreed with you, but I don't. And I think as an industry and ship owners, we put our efforts on it, and we invest a lot of money in it, so many $1 million. But of course, we are lagging behind when it comes to achieving the effects that we want to need. And I also want to mention the fact that for our industry and planet, it makes sense to talk about a reduction in absolutes, which the 20% target is. But as a company, we focus on carbon intensity, because otherwise it's difficult to measure the impacts. You can add more vessels to your fleet and your emissions will go up, but you might have more efficient operations, which is what we want. And we need a more environmentally friendly industry, but we do not want to stop sailing, because compared to other means of transporting goods, we're actually not the baddest player of the bunch. We're actually already the better alternative.
Thank you. Very well said there. Knut, do you have anything to add?
It's naturally very difficult to add anything at this stage on the round table. But I would just like to highlight that I think this is really the decisive decade. So we really have to take action and measures now. And I'm very pleased to hear that many are doing that. And we are living in very exciting times. I mean, I cannot recall it has been so interesting in the maritime industry as it is now. There are so many things going on. It has a tremendous gravity, I think, on new talents that would like to join our industry and help out, sort out some of these challenges. My only concern would be around the development of the dark fleet. And I think we have, I mean, with those that are sort of, operating around the compliance fleet, I think we will be in a good place. But the growing amount and tonnage in the dark fleet, I think, is something that we need to be more concerned about, and hopefully we will be able to deal with that. Otherwise, that's going to be, both when it comes to decarbonization, but also when it comes to safety, a major concern.
Thank you, Knut. I was about to say thank you to everybody for starting us off on an optimistic note, and then you mentioned the dark fleet.
Sorry.
But of course, it is an important point to consider. Coming back to what Knut just said initially, that it is time to take action now, and that this is the decisive decade. That maybe leads us nicely to everything that can be done today. Energy efficiency has been mentioned also by Arik. It's covered in our report, and we project that savings of up to 16% are possible by 2030. And I would like to hear a little bit what you think, and maybe also starting with you, Wiebke. We quickly discussed this when preparing for this panel, that TUI Cruises has high energy efficiency high up on the agenda, and that this is something that also maybe should be talked about some more. Maybe sharing from TUI Cruises, what are you doing and what's your view?
Well, of course, we developed a carbon reduction roadmap for us to achieve our ambitious targets. And an important role always played, apart from alternative fuels, the energy efficiency. And as said earlier, I mean, we are very happy that we operate one of the youngest fleets, and the Maya yard in Turku delivered 7 vessels which are extremely energy efficient, and every vessel got even more energy efficient. But we can do more, although all team were of the opinion that we already do very good. There's not anything more we can achieve, but there's always. So last year we implemented guiding principles for the ship leadership to learn from ships by maneuvering very simple things. And we also do use, of course, every dry dock to add more, like using new hull coatings or air lubrication system. And currently we are testing a hull cleaning robot and all these things which can be done in dry docks, but also in operation. That's very important. And now we are implementing also a system to have more data, to allow more data-driven decisions for the ship leadership. That will also add a lot, and I can disclose one number from last year, from 2023 to 2024, where we had basically same itineraries, and even the itineraries for 2 of our ships got longer, as we needed to go around South Africa. For reasons everybody knows, we managed to save 3% of energy just by ship operation. So I think this is a very good example. And overall, apart from the alternative fuels and shore power use, we expect that till 2030, we will achieve 12% by operational and technical measurements applied to the ships.
Thank you very much for sharing. Any barriers? Oh yeah, you get a round of applause for those great efforts. Any barriers or obstacles that you have encountered along the way to implementing these technologies and measures?
Well, there's always barriers from time to time. I think we all are used to that. Sometimes it's difficult to get, for example, we are talking of a propeller upgrade for ships for the dry docks, and this requires a long-term planning. Sometimes you just have to wait to get the things done and to get the propeller in a certain year of time. And also with regards to funding, for us, as we started our expansion phase earlier and invested in new ships and in new technology, so for us there's almost no possibility to get access to any kind of funding. So we have to do it and we have to finance ourselves in that case.
Thank you for that. It would lead nicely over to a question on financing, but you will have to wait for one more moment, because I would like to pass on the same question to Carl. Energy efficiency. What's Shell's view on energy efficiency? And maybe if we could expand that a little bit, because onboard carbon capture and storage was also mentioned as an important part of the solution, and no matter what scenario we're going to look at, it's likely going to play a role.
Yeah, so we also have a technology maturation plan out to 2035, I believe it is. There's over 120 different decarbonisation projects that we're running through at the moment. So every day is a school there for me, very much so. So in terms of some of the examples of things that we are actively either trialling or implementing, air lubrication systems is one that we have, shaft power generation, wind technologies, fuel cells. So we've also got 3 active projects looking at fuel cells. Why are we doing that? Well, if you think about some of the challenges that we'll have long term around the energy density of future fuels, when you can get an energy conversion efficiency of around about 60% from a fuel cell, and if you harness the waste heat, possibly up to 80%, that's something that we absolutely have to take notice of. But I also have a squad of kind of data scientists, data engineers, doing some of the digital work to develop some quite interesting solutions. One of those is JAWS, which is commercially available. Not a sales pitch, it's just a fact. But that's looking at kind of trim optimization, but using a machine learning algorithm in the background to get better and better with real-time live data. So we're doing an awful lot in that kind of space. And then I think we have to look at the alternative fuels, the lower carbon fuels, which we talked about in my first response, and I mentioned LNG there, and that's twice that I've mentioned LNG. So I would just like to mention methane slip as well, because that will be on people's minds as I mention it. And I do believe technically that's resolvable. There's 2 particular technologies that Shell is developing at the moment. One is a Shell wholly owned solution. The other is in collaboration with a third-party company. And we have one of those on a ship today. So we're seeing about 90%, 95% in that range, knocking out methane slip in the residual emission stream. So really good results. Just in terms of a couple of other insights, and then I'll get to the carbon capture point. One on modular ship designs. I think back in 2019, when decarbonisation took centre stage and kind of elbowed digitalisation a little bit out of the way, people were asking the question, well, why can't we design a fully fuel-flexible ship? I think in fairly short order, we understood that that kind of wasn't going to happen. It was very too difficult, too many barriers in the way. So we started focusing on fuels, and we've kind of been around that kind of treadmill for the last kind of 4 or 5 years. But actually, if you focus back on technology, there's things that you can do to really move out of that fuels discussion and build a modular ship that will allow you to make your CapEx decision much further down the line when there's further clarity on what fuels will be available for shipping. So for me, modular ship designs make a great deal of sense. On carbon capture, we don't see it as a technology challenge, we see it as a logistics challenge. My view is that with thousands and thousands and thousands of ships capturing CO2 on board, you will need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reception facilities, and then dozens and dozens of connected supply chain solutions behind that, and then disposal facilities. I think Eric made a very pertinent point around green corridors for carbon capture, where it can be tied into existing infrastructure. That makes absolutely perfect sense, and that's where I see the opportunity there. But for wider application, I think it's really challenged.
Oh, thank you for sharing, and I think it also came across in the chat with Arsenio and Knut that there are a few things outside our influence in the maritime industry, and the logistics challenge and the infrastructure challenge is certainly one of that.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing your view. Now, investments have been mentioned as a barrier by Wiebke. Of course, I mean it's been mentioned by Arik. Decarbonization will come at a cost, no doubt about that. And yes, the costs are likely going to be passed all the way through the value chain. That's just something that we will have to get used to. And all of these costs will be significant also when talking about especially implementing extra technology on board of vessels. Anastasia, how do you see the financing of these technologies evolving, and what role can or should banks and financial institutions play to incentivize these investments?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for the question, Anne. So maybe just go back to the basics. So what is the function of financial institutions, of banks in particular? We are an intermediary between supply of capital and demand of capital, and we manage the risk of transferring funds from one side to the other. When it comes to shipping, actually, and any sector that we as ABN AMRO provide financing solutions to, energy transition has become a very important part of our capital distribution already. What we do as ABN AMRO, we have developed a climate tool when it comes to shipping, where we look at data sets of historical emissions and at potential measures on how to decrease these emissions, which we then turn into products that we can offer to our clients. For us, the next step will be looking more into predictive analytics and being able to be more proactive towards our clients. And I want to highlight, it's not our transition; it's a transition of our clients. There, I do want to say that in order to create scale and to be meaningful, we are quite humble. So where I very much believe, it was already said, look outwards, don't look inward. I very much believe that it will be a movement of the value chain. I believe in economies of scale, in ecosystem thinking. So what we would like to do is attract different parties in the industry, data providers, of course, our shipping clients, regulators, in order to come together to gather more data that we can then turn into a proper solution. Now, being a Northwest European bank headquartered in Amsterdam, we are very close to the ARA ports, which it was already mentioned how important infrastructure will be. We look at cross-sector investments when it comes to carbon capture, to hydrogen carriage. And I think there it will be very important to look at collaborations between regulatory bodies, different states, companies, and the financial sector. We are all convinced of the benefits and of the need to decarbonize, but I want to go back to incentives. I don't think that the incentives today are so visible. So I do believe that the next tipping point will be very much regulatory driven, and banks, being the catalyst of society and regulators to decarbonize the world economy, we would have to implement it. So innovation, collaboration, a lot of usage of data, sharing data, and remain cautiously optimistic.
Thank you for that. You just mentioned the importance of data, sharing data. It's been also mentioned by Carl and Wiebke, and that's a nice segue over to you, Kirstine. I would like to come back to a point that Eirik made earlier on digitalization that has not quite been moved out of the picture by decarbonization just yet. In fact, digitalization is a key enabler for decarbonization. And Kirstine, I would like to learn from you, if you could share from Greek Maritime, what are you doing leveraging digitalization to advance your company's decarbonization strategy?
Thank you. I think, well, we know that percentage-wise, new fuels will have the most significant contribution towards 2050. it's now today all about becoming more energy efficient. And to be able to do that, you need good data that you can trust and use. And it's easy to say, and it's difficult to achieve. But what gets measured gets done, so that's a very, very important part. And it has also been mentioned that the green shift has a really steep price attached to it, and digital development can be a good tool of reducing cost. So each time Eirik talked about cost reduction, I was listening even closely. So I also think digital development is a less painful way of reducing costs compared to a lot of other choices, because it's about new competence and more competence and not about reducing the number of people and so on. And in our portfolio companies and together with partners, we've done a lot to future-proof the basics, such as cloud infrastructure, connectivity, cybersecurity, and so on. And we're really now working hard to better utilize it. So whether it be through sensors, machine learning, you all know the buzzwords. And in addition to that, we have really competent crew, which was mentioned as well, and onshore employees, who also still has a lot of manual reporting and checklists and even paper. So I think for us to automate what we can and improve those processes would be beneficial for everyone. And it's not as fancy as AI and robotics, but still highly relevant. Yeah. So yeah.
An important enabler for decarbonization, but also a huge potential for efficiency gains. And also, I mean, talking about maybe making also life for people working in the maritime industry more interesting, because there's a huge potential, of course, as you said, many new potential tools, technologies for people to explore.
Yeah, and we're honest about the fact that we need new competence. We need a more holistic strategy where digital has an even bigger role. Yeah. And we need a faster pace on the development. And I'm sure this has been said many years earlier as well, but I think we are at a point where as a company and as an industry, it's not a viable option to keep continuing doing what we've always done. So we need to improve, or a faster pace, or hoist all sails, as a maritime analogy I got.
Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, time flies, so we have time for one final question. This one goes to all of you again. And I was about to do it in reversed order, but Kirsten, I'm going to give you a break. So we're going to start with Anastasia again, if I may. And I would like to circle back to where we started, where it was about taking stock of our progress. And you said you're cautiously optimistic. Now, usually at these panels, what we do is we look a long way into the future. We talk about 2050 mainly. 2030 is a little more around the corner. And now let's do something extremely crazy and talk about 2025, next year. And I'm not going to ask you about your priorities like we did for Arsenio, but what I would like to know from you is, imagine it's another Maritime Forecast launch event in a year's time and you get invited again. What are you anticipating? What is your projection? How confident are you today that next year we will have made enough progress, or the right amount of progress that will be needed to tackle this enormous challenge?
Well, and I see that we have 3 minutes,
yes.
And you need to have all the panelists answer. So you really got me on the 2025. So I think it was already said a couple of things. So the direction of travel is crystal clear. I think it's fantastic that this sector has a global regulator. I think it's fantastic that we have so much data. I do believe that companies, we cannot build strategies for 30 years to come. We build strategies for the 5 years to come. Shipping is a sector which is very tightly linked to macroeconomics, to human capital, to everything that happens on the geopolitical arena around the world. So let me say maybe what I hope for. Being cautiously optimistic and the glass being half full. I hope we will continue to make better use of our data. I hope that we will take care of human capital on sea, and that this industry will be able to attract the right talent to make this switch from paper to to data and have meaningful contribution by us, by humans. And I hope to see more examples of cross-sector collaboration and collaboration between states, regulators, financiers, and ship owners.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Super. I keep it super short. For next year, I'm really confident for 2025 as we are getting a new ship to our fleet, and it will be a dual fuel ship with dual fuel engines, so we will be able to burn bio-LNG and biodiesel. That helps, and I'm also confident for another reason that next year even more ports will be equipped with shore power facilities, so that should also help. So for next year, I'm confident.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to build real confidence for 12 months from now, I think there's three things that I would look for. One is the basket of measures that we talked about earlier on, and I'm hearing really good progress is being made, which is excellent to hear. I think in terms of the short-term measures, moving away from a catalogue of potential solutions more to compliance pathways. So seeing those implemented and sharing those lessons learned more broadly. And then I think greater commitment to the lower carbon fuels that we have in the system today. We know we've got a healthy order book. Eric talked about that, but even more confidence around the role that LNG has to play in the future.
Thank you for sharing. Kerstin.
Yeah, I think it can't be the ship owners with the biggest hearts and greenest ambitions that drive the development. I think everyone has to invest while staying competitive. And a year from now is not a lot of time, but I am confident that we will get there in the end. I just hope that we do it faster than what the prognosis shows.
Thank you, Kerstin. Knut, don't spoil it.
My hope for next year is that we will also talk about carbon capture corridors and try to get some of those into a conceptual stage. I think that would be an ambitious but important target. Did I spoil it?
Not at all. Very well said. A big thank you and round of applause to all of you. This was a great panel. Thank you. And stay seated because I will only need about 1 or 2 minutes to now officially wrap up the event. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much also to all of you for being a great audience, both online and here in this room. Don't forget, Maritime Forecast is available for download at dnv.com/Maritime Forecast. Also, if you're interested to dive a little bit deeper into the report's findings, we have organized an online webinar on the 17th of September. We'll go deeper into the facts and the figures, but also there you will have the opportunity to ask questions and engage with our experts. And of course, by all means, if you have any questions related to your company's energy transition and what can be done to decarbonize, we're there for you. Reach out. All of our DNV experts will be very happy to help. Ladies and gentlemen, the very best of health to you and your families, and I hope to see you again very, very soon at another DNV event. Thank you.